Crowdfunding definition and update. Crowdfunding describes the collective cooperation and attention and trust by people, network, and pool their money and other resources together, usually via the internet, to support efforts initiated by other people or organizations. President Obama signed it into law. Congress and the Senate ratified it. It's in the hands of the SEC at the moment, right? So let's talk about that for a moment. The SEC has this crowdfunding, but ahead of it is the Frank Dodd Act. See, what people don't understand is that Frank Dodd was to be implemented almost, I would say, it's about a good 9 to 12 months behind. Frank Dodd was really written to protect the American people. It's not about advancing capitalism. It's about protection. So their priority in the SEC's charter really is to protect the American people from fraud and misrepresentation and regulation of integrity of the markets, right? I think most of us can agree to that. So their priority is to get Frank Dodd done. Along the way came this Jobs Act with all these new security rules that in a sense aren't really very restrictive. In fact, they're less restrictive. And I can publicly state, because it's on the record, it was publicly stated by former Commissioner Shapiro, who was kind of the master commissioner, if you will. She said when this Jobs Act was implemented that it set back security laws by 15 years in investor protection. She was not for it. She had some very specific concerns about it. So I'm going to get into in a minute about other external agencies that aren't really for crowdfunding, and in fact are pretty well against it. But it's the law, and it's got to come through. The pressure's on the SEC, though, to come up with a product, if you will, that you're going to be able to use to raise money, but has some anti-fraud provision in it. And the concern is that it's going to have a lot of fraud associated with it, because bad people are going to look at this opportunity and say, look, it's unregulated, I don't have to submit anything, I've got an idea, I can take up to $1,000 from unaccredited investors, unlimited number, how many $1,000s can I collect, and go to Bermuda, right? Now, for those of us, and I was telling Wendy earlier, and I'm not picking on grandmas, but for those of us that have grandmas in the room, grandma gets a call, this is a cure for cancer, you gotta get it, it's gonna change the world, she's on the other end of the phone, she doesn't know any better, and somebody's now soliciting her for her $1,000 Social Security check to put in this crowdfunding deal. See, that kind of thing takes the AARP to the edge of their seat. They don't like it. They've told me they don't like it. And they asked me, they said, Mark, you got involved with this crowdfunding, you helped Senator Brown, legislative aid craft it, you worked with Senator Merkley on the Democratic side, craft it. You know this pretty well, what can you do to help us here? Well, I'm not going to sit here on one side and promote capitalism in this country, then on the other side, try to figure out a ways to slow it down. So what I am willing to do, though, is find a balance. And I do believe there's a balance. And that's part of the reason why we created the International Crowdfunding Association. The SEC, though, realistically, with everything they got on their plate, I believe, again, it's going to be 2014 before it's an actually usable platform. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit here now about Regulation A. As I talked about, it has to test the waters. You can shareholders up to 2,000, and you can raise up from $5 to $30 million. So here's how it works, right? So I need to get somebody's product, a project that they're willing to share together. Who has a project that they want to get funded, that they're willing to share, that I can use the Regulation A test the waters example of how you might use Reg A. Anybody got a project they want to share? No takers? I got an internet guy, okay? Okay, go ahead. Okay, you want to fund your internet.
We've got a project it's a productivity system for home management that has been launched and has a few thousand users.
Okay.
And needs a lot of money to expand nationally.
Okay, so how you could effectively use Regulation A from an entrepreneur standpoint, how you could do that is you're looking for homeowners would be an example, or just
Stay-at-home moms.
stay-at-home moms. So one of the ways you can use Regulation A to do that is, one, you can create an infomercial, two, you can create a radio spot, or three, you can do direct response. So at the same time, you create your collateral piece, you send it to the SEC for approval. They're going to look at it for anti-fraud. It's a one-page document, you don't need an attorney to fill it. You then take that one-page document, you mirror it, and you send it to Georgia. Georgia looks at it. Georgia says, okay, the SEC okayed it, we look at it, it's got anti-fraud, you're good to go. So in your collateral piece, as you're soliciting your investors to purchase your product, in the bottom, you're saying there's an investment opportunity. If you really and truthfully like this product, please contact us to invest in this company. That is how you would use the general solicitation provision of Regulation A. You're not making any outrageous claim, it's pretty limited, and that's how you can effectively use it. You have at this point spent very little or no money for your security documents. Once you have your list compiled of potential investors, okay, you can then go back and get your security documents done. And they're not that relatively expensive when compared to a Regulation D offering, okay? I happen to be a big advocate of Reg A. What I can tell you, though, is what's driving Regulation A across the country is that the state of Florida, the state of Texas, there's a few other states that didn't bite off on Regulation A and give it the federal exemption. The states, in the final hour, back in 1994, when George Bush Sr. brought Regulation A, kind of when the country was in a recession, say, let's do this Regulation A thing, very similar to the Jobs Act, some of the states said, whoa, not in our state, okay? We're not going to allow it. Florida happened to be one of them. So all of a sudden this crowdfunding thing comes along, and the states go, oh man, look at this crowdfunding thing, it's coming right at us. Well, what are we going to do about it? And my argument was to them and to the National Director of State Security Administrators, who I happen to know personally in Washington, is I said, look, you got to take it back to every single state security administrator, and you need to tell them either they buy down on Reg A and allow people to start doing Reg A's in their state, or everybody's going to do a crowdfunding offering because they can't do anything about a crowdfunding offering. The state of Florida has absolutely no control over anybody who does a crowdfunding offering at this time. Now, if you're perpetrating a fraud, trust me, the state's going to get involved, and the AG is going to get involved, and they're going to go to Washington, and they're going to stop you. They're not going to, they're not going to allow this crowdfunding thing. People in the state of Florida get residents to be taken advantage of, and they'll do enforcement. However, they're also now relooking at this Regulation A, saying, hey, maybe we better come up with an alternative to crowdfunding. Because, see, with Regulation A, at least it's a reviewed document. They know who's doing it. You're going through some sort of registration, or at least knowing who's advertising. And I'll take your call. I'll take your question if you could hold it. But go ahead real fast.
Well, after the Regulation A, so you have 100, 200 interested investors.
You mean after test the waters?
Test the waters.
Right.
What's next?
So then what you would simply do is go get your security offering documents prepared.
A
guy like Matt Romney could do that for you. And then what you would do is the SEC would review those documents. You would then get them back, and then you can go back to those investors and say, hey, here's my offering. You now furnish them the offering document. and they're free to invest.
That would be a private placement? or not?
No, it would be a Regulation A. Be a Regulation A. And go ahead.
I don't know if this is a dumb question.
No, it's nothing's dumb in my world, Ben.
What are the investors getting for their money?
Well, that's exactly it. They're getting your stock. They're buying stock.
I thought you couldn't do that.
Well, you can't do that if it's a crowdfunding offering. This is a different type of offering. This is a Regulation A offering,
All right.
okay? And I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. There's 3 different platforms I said I was going to talk about today. Okay, this is a Regulation A offering. This is different than crowdfunding. And this is available today, and this is why I'm bringing it up. You can do this today, right? It's the Jobs Act. It's about getting things moving. There's nothing more than I would love to see for Wendy to have all these companies in this incubator funded. Nothing would make me more happy for myself, because I was the guy sitting down at the end of the hall in one of the first offices, and I would see this great world-class cutting-edge technology, professor after professor after professor that knew nothing about capital formation, how to work it, what the process was to get started, come to me and say, Mark, I got this rapid AIDS test